It is good, no, it is great to be at Wisconsin Campmeeting. They'll get the sound figured out. Don't worry about them. I have heard much about you from friends of mine who may even be here, or some of them, but we'll figure that out lately. I understand the cool people sit toward the back. Right? I see a thumbs up. Cool people. Let's hear it for cool people. I see you, Doug. You've always been a cool people. Again, my name is Craig. That was the name I was born with. Sticking with it. I was born with more hair than I have today, but that's a whole nother story. It's really cool to be with you all, and I have to pause for a moment and acknowledge the bravery it takes to get up in front of you all, such as our young pianist friend just a few moments ago. You know? What song? Yeah, it was great. What song did he play? It is well with my wallet. That wasn't the song. That wasn't the title. It is well with my job. No. Far more importantly, it is well, because of the grace of Jesus, it is well with my soul. We're going to actually talk about that song on Thursday, but what a journey that represents. Run the race. You know, it's interesting as pretty much a lifelong runner. Whenever I start talking about running, people run. Look at the time. You know, I've got another appointment I need to get to. I need to run off. You know, it's interesting how that phrase, I need to run to the store, or I'm running late. We use the word all the time. It's just a few crazy people that actually do it on a regular basis. But I stand before you, admittedly, a runner, and admittedly, a little crazy. You'll get to know that a little bit here this week. Our theme text, I have read in about 6 different translations in the last week. I don't know if you've come across the Passion Translation. And again, we're not bending theology here by reading various translations. You probably have a go-to. One of mine is the New King James Version. I love the NKJV. I love NIV. Right now I'm reading through, and you'll see quoted, the New Living Translation, because I run through the Bible every year as a part of my devotional time, and I'm kind of stuck in 2 Kings right now here in June. But the Passion Translation kind of expounds, sort of like the Message Translation by Eugene Peterson, but reading here from Hebrews 12. As for us, we have all of these great witnesses who encircle us like clouds. What is he referring to? Chapter 11, which we'll talk about tomorrow. So we must let go. Hear me, church. We must let it go. I'll say it again. Let it go. Some of you are with me. Now that song is stuck in your head. So we must let go of every wound that has pierced us, and we all have them. We are being called to let go of those wounds and those hurts, those weights. We'll talk about weights tomorrow as well. And we must let go of the sin that so easily we fall into. Then we will be able to run life's marathon. Now you can see why this is a favorite translation of mine. They use the word marathon. Okay, that got my attention. So now that we've let go of these things that are hindering us, then we can run this marathon race with passion and determination. Not just, can I survive this? Can I only finish without dying? For the path has been already marked out before us. We do not create original footprints on this path. The footprints of Jesus go before our faith journey. Verse 2. We look away from the natural realm and we focus our attention and expectation unto Jesus, who birthed faith within us, the author, and who leads us forward into faith's perfection, the finisher. His example is this: because his heart was focused, because the heart of Jesus was focused on the joy of knowing that you would be his, he endured. We're going to talk a little bit about endurance. He endured the agony of the cross, despising the shame. That's a phrase familiar to us. And he conquered its humiliation, and now sits exalted at the right hand of the throne of God. Wow. What a message. What a theme we enjoy here this week. Well, I've always been a runner, and I trace it back to the 4th grade. Because as it would so happen, teachers don't appreciate those that disrupt class all the time with their humor and their stories. And so my teacher would send me out to run laps, figuring that I should use that energy in a more constructive way while she could teach the rest of the students without my interruptions. So yes, the class clown, you guessed that. And so my mother was also a teacher at the school, and so on those days I was sent out as a messenger, running around the field. Of course, she would see, and we'd have a conversation at home. But I trace running back to when I was a kid. And it's been a part of my life, and like many things, off and on and off, here and there, but certainly more recently, a lot more regularly. I've never considered myself a competitive runner, but purely a recreational runner, an amateur, which means for the love of running. And you know some of the official, quote, races, because really it's only a race for the first 3 that finish. The rest of us are just happy to cross the line. But there's the 5K. I think one took place yesterday morning, right? Did you all call it a fun run? Because those words for some don't go together. Fun, run, really? I know they rhyme, but come on. There's the 5K, 3.1 miles, right? Because, you know, we have to convert things from kilometers to miles. There's the 10K, which is 6.2 miles. Because if you run 6 miles, you haven't run a 10K. You've got to run the 0.2. And yeah, I'm one of those runners that I look at my watch as I get back to my house, and if it says 5.97, I have to run past my neighbor's house. Okay, 6 miles, got it. Then I can go take that shower. So I've always been a runner, and there have been times in which I was a heavy runner, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. There have been times that I was a little slower or a little faster. There were times that I had to get up really early in the morning in the darkness of Berrien Springs to get my run in before class at seminary. But running has been, I remember the first official 10K I ran in my early 20s. And when you're in your early 20s, you can just get out of bed, get dressed, and go run a 10K. You could just do that, and that's kind of what I did and almost killed myself, but, you know, but I was in Colorado. It was at altitude, and so that matters a little bit, that little thinner air. But a Memorial Day event, the Boulder is the second largest 10K in the United States, attracting over 40,000 runners each Memorial Day. And it finishes in the University Stadium, and they have kind of a Memorial Day type of program at the end. It's just a great way to kick off the summer. And our church there in Boulder would sponsor the water station there at the start line. So thousands and thousands of cups of water that we would give away to all the runners. And the route took you through the neighborhoods and up and down and around. And that finish, as you run down the ramp and into the stadium, surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, it's such a wonderful feeling. And also because you're done, that's also a very wonderful feeling. How did it work out for the first marathoner? You know, before we had texting, and even well before the Pony Express, around the Midwest, you kind of see those historical markers here and there, you know, that part of the route and that kind of thing. When urgent news, you can read through 1 Samuel and other Old Testament stories. When urgent news needs to be carried quickly, you send a runner, you send a messenger, and they run by themselves to carry news. And our friend Phidippides, the Athenian messenger who ran the 40 kilometers from Marathon to Athens in 490 BC, he delivered the news of victory. I mean, who doesn't want to be the bearer of good news? Those of you that believe in the gospel, who doesn't want to be the bearer of good news? And so he delivers his news and then collapses dead. And that's how it ended for him. And for some reason, we have memorialized this for centuries now by running 26.2. And when you do that, there are moments in which you think you're going to die, like our friend Phidippides, and then there's moments when you think you're not going to die. But I think of the message that he was bearing. He was shouting essentially a singular word, Nike. And that wasn't the shoes he was wearing at the time, but the name or the word for victory. And that was the story of the first marathon. My first marathon took place on May 7, 2017. I'll never forget the date for a number of reasons. But again, having run various distances and having run a half marathon, I thought it would be a good idea to run a full marathon. Actually, it was one of those kind of bucket list kinds of things. You know, if I can just do one and have that sense of accomplishment. And so I signed up and paid my money. And once you write that check or, you know, charge that amount or, you know, you're kind of committed. And there's a reason for that. I mean, there's expenses to be cared for the event, but it also kind of commits you, you know. It's like, all right, I'm going to do this. I've paid the money. I'm going to do this. It took place in Fort Collins, Colorado. At the start line, I was among several thousand other runners, and this was a route that you got on a bus, and they took you up into the mountains, and then you ran down the hill for the first half, and then it was flat from there to the finish. So there was a bit of overconfidence that one can gain when they're running downhill for the first half. But I remember at the starting line, meeting several different people and talking with there was this older lady that, you know, retirement age, but she was just friendly and bursting with energy. And she said, well, hello, how are you? I'm fine, and how are you? Oh, I'm great. What's your goal today? She asked. My goal, I said, is to finish. And she said, good for you. She says, well, I have run a marathon in every state 3 times. Do the math. That's over 150 marathons. And so now I'm doing my 4th round of doing a marathon. And there are these crazy people. One of my colleagues and friends, Dave and his wife Cindy, are on their 40th state, and they sign up for a marathon in every single state and hoping to finish with, Boston. But that's an elite race in kind of its own category. But this lady was just full of energy and enthusiasm, and I just thought, how cool is that? And here is a fellow runner, not a competitor, but a fellow runner in this race. And the same is true in life, is it not? I mean, really, is this a competition? Or are we trying to encourage each other in our journeys? I'm sure that little old lady finished way, and I say little old lady because she was short, and she was older, and she was a lady. But I'm sure she finished well ahead of me that day. And I eventually finished. I want to show you a picture because it represents a number of things. First of all, there's that happy face, that happy round face on the left, just after completing the marathon. The face didn't look like that for the last 8 miles, I guarantee you. And the two fellas running on either side of me, Michael and Christian, also marathon runners, but when they heard that I had signed up for a marathon, they knew that I needed help. And so, being a somewhat formal but not quite so like gated off, locked in kind of course, they joined me at mile 20 and ran the rest of the race with me to 26.2. Now I say they ran the rest of the race with me. I was walking. I was so worn out. I mean, this car had run out of gas. And I was just like, oh, hey guys, yeah, sure, yeah, okay. And we started, we would run for a little bit and then we'd slow back down and walk. And they stayed with me until we finished, until we finished. Only I had signed up for this race, but they volunteered their time and energies and their friendship. Folks, we need each other. Even when you think you are the only one running, and we'll talk about that Wednesday, there are others running with you. Even when you think, oh, I alone, God has a message, no. You are never alone. Oh, thank you, yeah. You know, I needed this at about 7:30 this morning. I was out for my run, and yeah, we're talking a lot about running. And I was doing the 6-mile loop. Anybody else done the 6-mile loop? You start here, go down a mile, turn, go down a mile, and then go 2 miles, and come back up. And thankfully, I found myself back here at the camp. But at about mile 4, when I needed this, I came across a lady who had pulled over to the side, and she was doing this on the side of the road. I said, what? I stopped and I said, what are we looking for? And she said, I've lost a key. And I looked at her car, and she said, oh, it was a spare key. I said, oh, okay, she's not gonna be stranded there. But so we looked for a while, and she says, yeah, it's shiny, it's silver, we should be able to find it. And she said, and then she looked at me on foot, and she said, do you live around here? It's interesting when people see you out running. Often I've been stopped and asked directions. They figure if I'm foot, I must know where I'm going. But this morning, this lady was looking for this key, and no, I'm staying over at Campbell Condo. Oh, I know that place, yeah. So she said she felt it her responsibility to then give me directions to find my way back. Oh yeah, if you just follow this road and you come to E, she pronounced E, take a right, and you'll see it, down. Oh, thank you. Now, where is that key? I said, where is that key? And what I wished I had done was pray with her. But I just went on my way. As she said, as I'm getting back up to speed, using that term loosely, God bless you. So I prayed as I run, because I often pray while I run, Lord, please help this lady find that key. And this is over by the lake, and I was enjoying the lake, and then I saw the hill that you have to climb to get back up to E. But 3 or 4 minutes later, She comes driving past me in her little car, waving like this, almost like saying, Nike, Nike, victory, you know. The Lord answered that prayer. Just an encounter this morning on my run. But Michael and Christian joined me that day to finish that race. I had a very important meeting that afternoon, and yet I wasn't prepared for the mental drain that came from the physical drain of completing a marathon, because my brain was mush. I was worthless for a few hours that afternoon, and that was quite an experience. But everyone that crossed the line got one of those medals. Now, I know we live in a day and age which everyone gets a trophy, you know. But in the race of salvation, is our theme verse in Hebrews 12 calling us to win or to finish? Who has won the victory for us? Jesus. Like in Sabbath school, the answer to the question is always Jesus. He has won the victory for us. He has asked us to run the race that he himself has set before us. My race looks different than your race. He's offered to run with us. I think of Mark chapter 2 and the story of the lame man with 4 friends. I know there's only 2 of them, but this is a very similar scene because I felt pretty lame in this moment. But they carried their friend to Jesus. They carried him. The house was so full they couldn't get in, so they had to let him down through the roof. They were creative, they were innovative because they were committed to getting their friend to Jesus. And we all need friends like that, every last one of us. So some lessons that I've learned from running a few marathons. I've done a baker's dozen of them so far, and I've got 3 more this year. A little crazy to do 3, but just the way the calendar falls and some of the goals that I have. But whether it's the decision to run a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon, an ultra, or a 50-miler, or a 100-miler, it gets more ludicrous the further we go. There are 24-hour races in which you just simply run as far as you can in a 24-hour period. There are things that just go far beyond the level I find myself. But at the same time, in saying all that, please never refer to your own journey as, well, it's just this. You know, in comparison to everybody. No, this is your journey that God has called you to. It's not just, don't minimize, dismiss the journey God has called you to. But when you make the decision and you sign up online and you pay the fee, you're essentially, as far as the race organizers, committed. But it's still your decision whether you're committed. That date goes on the calendar. You kind of think about the week before and what's going on and if there's things going on around that, and you start planning. The longer the race is in miles, the more preparation required. And if you Google couch to 5K or couch to 10K, you'll find lots of really helpful plans to get you from not moving much to moving much more than not a lot. For most, it matters not the time, except to you. Perhaps you're trying to establish a PR, personal best, personal record. And so you're essentially racing against yourself, marking your own progress from the last races that you've entered, and then wanting to do better that day. But again, when it comes to lining up at the start line, these are not your competitors. They're your fellow racers. Yesterday, my daughter and son-in-law ran together what they called the Father's Day 10K. So I thought that was kind of cool. Both of them had been running, and my son-in-law kind of picked up on this idea of a running streak. We'll talk about that here in a moment, but they ran in Southern California at about 10:30 a.m. till about noon, getting kind of hot, but they ran a 10K. And I thought that was pretty cool, that they ran it together. As the race draws near and you think about that $40 or $120 or whatever the registration fee was, you begin to wonder if you'll waste that investment or not. But no, you'll show up. You'll get up extra early. You'll go through the routine. You'll arrive at the start line. You'll run the race. I think when we consider those race fees, we have to take a step back and wonder, so I'm paying other people money that I earned for me to inflict pain upon myself. This is a bit backwards when you think about it, but again, it does take quite a bit to organize a race. Plan to be uncomfortable. Even in saying the words, it makes us squirm a little bit because we all like to be comfortable. You brought with you from home items for your comfort while you're here at Campmeeting. Did you bring your favorite pillow? Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. I have a witness. Okay. Did you bring your favorite teddy bear? You don't have to answer that. Maybe your child did. But when we think about, there are so many things that we do to sustain our comfort, and yet to make progress in training. This is an Olympic year, Summer Olympics, Paris, and there are hundreds, if not thousands of athletes all over the world that are prioritizing their lives with one goal in mind. And at each step of the way, there are heats. There are qualifying events in which they've got to run and be in that top 2 or 3 to advance to the next and to the next. The sectionals, regionals, nationals, all of those in various countries to decide who will go. There is what's called threshold training. Your threshold is the place to which you come that you naturally want to back up a little bit. Whoa, 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 whoa. That's pushing it a little bit. Maybe it's your heart rate, maybe it's your pain, maybe it can come at different, maybe it's your breathing. You reach that threshold and, okay, I need to back it off a little bit, right? Training involves encountering that threshold more often than you would like. And there's, again, varying levels of training plans that are out there, but it involves being uncomfortable. There's no replacement for putting the miles on your shoes. You can sign up and you can think about running a 10K. You can think about it and think, you can study it, you can watch YouTube about it, you can read a lot of books about it, but unless you actually get out there and put a few miles on, you're going to arrive at the race unprepared. The same is true for the spiritual life. We stand no chance in going against the devil. Not a single chance by ourselves. We are unprepared without the full armor of God. We are unprepared if not covered by His grace. We can't just waltz in thinking that we're a cowboy riding on our trusty steed and going to save the day with our white hat on. We must prepare ourselves for race day. And those race days can sneak up on us in life. Those very important decisions, those very important spiritual encounters, those very important conversations. Lord, may we be instant in season, always ready, always ready. Marathon training includes daily, weekly, and monthly mile goals. And there's just simply no replacement for putting in the miles. Once you've signed up for a race and committed, then everything has an effect on your training. While a lot of running makes perfect sense, there are other factors to pay attention to. Getting enough, not ice cream, but getting enough sleep. Getting enough sleep. Did you know God is staying up all night working while you're sleeping? It's a wonderful thing. He who watches over Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God does not have pajamas. What your body is doing while you're sleeping is repairing itself. Both your brain and your body. Just as there is no replacement for getting in the miles, there is no replacement for not getting enough sleep. And yes, the average has not changed, even though the actual average has. We require 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's a third of your life. I'm not selling you mattresses today, but I will tell you, it's really important that we get our sleep. Diet and nutrition are the building blocks as you consider the difference between food as entertainment and food as fuel. Are you with me? There are many unacceptable drugs we Seventh-day Adventist Christians avoid. Smoking and alcohol are just two. But there are many other justifiable ways in which maybe a little is okay, but too much is not good. And yet, it's an acceptable drug, if you will. It's even an acceptable addiction, if you will. It's a fairly common condition in which, as long as it's some type of diet, without label, then it must be okay. But socially, culturally, look at the stories of Jesus in the Gospels. When he gathered with people, they ate food. It's how we operate. You can't gather 2 or 3 together and not have food. But it's what kind and how much that I began paying a little closer attention to even just a few years ago. Drinking enough fluids, particularly in wonderful climates that just want to wrap its arms around you, like humidity, like a warm blanket. We've got to replace those fluids. Our body is designed, its cooling systems. The literal radiator of this car was almost to boiling point this morning after about mile 6. But thinking about the fluids and thinking about the composition of your body is mostly water. Replacing that. You don't know where your limits are until you've pushed them. Now, I'm not talking about the speed limit and driving. I know many have kind of a tithe mind when it comes to speed limit. You know, if I go 10% over, it's okay, you know. A friend of mine several years ago now had found himself in some pretty unhealthy habits and a pretty difficult time in his life. He was able to put those substances aside, and he started setting some goals. And I kid you not, this is from his sister. He said, I am going to run from my house to the end of the block. That is my goal today. I'm going to run from my house to the end of the block. That's it. So he did that. The next day, he ran to the next telephone pole beyond his block. That was his goal. These are really small goals, are they not? And yet that, at his life stage, were very appropriate goals to make. He is now an ultra-marathon runner that just finished a 50-mile run a few weeks ago. 50 miles. And I will tell you that mentally and spiritually, he's in a much, much healthier place along with his physical condition. Pushing limits. He had accepted that his old limits of his potential would never have been seen unless he had set these other goals to push beyond his present capacity. And for me, I had to reject the idea that I was a bald, middle-aged, overweight pastor. I thought it was acceptable to be a bald, middle-aged, overweight pastor. And I finally said no. And so I logged on to Hair Club for Men, and I am... No, that wasn't what I was going to battle. The bald thing, well, what are you going to do? The age thing, well, it is just a number. We'll save some of that for tomorrow. Routine may be boring, but it gets the job done. There are certain things that already today you have done, perhaps even without thinking about it. Now, last night, I set an alarm. However, 95% of the time, I wake up before my alarm. Just wake up. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes it's a few hours before. And it seems like the older I get, the earlier I wake up. But another story. There are many, many things just from a hygiene perspective that we do every day. And running just happens to be one of those things that's worked its way into my routine. To see goals, I know that looked like a typo for a minute because we usually say set goals, but to see goals in processes, I think is important, because it's one thing to have goals and to think about them. It's another to write them down. It's another to set a goal and then write out a strategy of how you're going to reach that goal. And sometimes that involves lots of smaller goals, like running to the end of the block before you run 50 miles. Often we find ourselves in a place that we did not get to overnight, and we won't get out of overnight. But Lord, teach me patience. Teach me patience. So, what is it to run every day? It's a little kooky, but back in 2018, I noticed that I had run every day, about 3 miles every day, for I think it was 17 days. And I thought, I wonder if I can get to 30 days. That'd be kind of cool. Run for a whole month, you know? And so I reached that 30th day. By then, I was like, I bet I can run every day for 50 days. So I kept running. Each morning, went out for a run. And we were living in Washington State. I was serving in the Washington Conference as vice president. And on the Seattle side of the mountains, it gets a lot of rain. And so some of these days, it was just that fine mist where you can't even see it coming. You're just wet. And other days, it's pouring down rain, cats and dogs. But after 50 days, I thought, I wonder if I can make it to 100 days. That'd be really cool, to run every single day for 100 days. By then, I had upped my daily to 4 miles, and that just seemed like a good amount of time to get in and start the day with 4 miles. So I ran for 100 days. And so with that goal met, I thought, I wonder if I could run for 6 months. You know, kind of make it from one season to another. Well, take that back. Seattle only has 2 seasons. Rain and the other one. But actually, when it's not raining, Seattle is a beautiful place. A beautiful place. Mountains, sea, lots of people. 6 months. By that point, it was summertime, and the weather was very friendly, and so I kept running each day. Then the faucet turned back on in September, and the rain returned. But by then, it takes about 3 months to develop a habit. And there really isn't such a thing as breaking a habit. We replace a habit we want to get rid of with a better habit. And again, we're creatures of habit and routine. And so I found myself, without even thinking, going out each morning for there was some thought. I mean, I put clothes on and shoes and all that. But it just kind of became automatic. And then I reached, as the holidays approached, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all that. It's just a few days after Christmas, around my dad's birthday, that is that annual time that my run streak has a birthday. But it's been my routine for about 5.5 years now. I get up every morning, drink a great big glass of water, and spend time with Jesus in study and in prayer, and then I go out for my run. And with that routine, I wouldn't give up any portion of it. Even when you need to get to an appointment and the public transportation, AKA airline, has a 6:30 a.m. flight that will get you to that appointment on time, and so you've got to be at the airport at 4 or 4:30 or 5 if you're an experienced traveler or whatever else. And so you just keep backing up from that appointment. There have been times in which I've been running through my neighborhood, getting my 4 miles in at 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, now you're convinced. He's crazy. Whenever possible, having healthy routines in our lives is life-giving, even when it might come with some sacrifice. So what is a running streak? I'm glad you asked. A running streak, according to runeveryday.com, there is a registry of almost 5,000 people who have run a minimum of 1 mile every single day for a minimum of 1 year. That's when your running streak becomes an official running streak. And yes, I use the terms together because if I use just the second word, it implies different things. So running streak. So when we think about running every single day, the minimum is just 1 mile, and yet my objective, my goal has been a minimum of 4 miles, and that's how the miles tend to add up so much from week to week and month to month. And I love to run when it's sunny. I don't mind running when it's raining. In Nebraska, it gets cold, and it also gets really windy. And it can be quite wonderful when you're running with the wind, but at some point you have to get back home. So you got to turn around and run into the wind. I was reminded again this morning that what goes down must come back up as I encountered some of the little hills. Now, when you're driving, you hardly notice because your transmission does the work for you. Or you just step on the gas a little harder. But coming up some of the slopes, especially after the little lake and coming up to E on that road, I think it's First Street, that slope there was slowing me down a little bit. I actually love to run when it's snowing. It's just the coolest thing to be out there. For those skiers that like to be on the mountain when it's snowing or whatever else, again, it's very much tied to what armor you are wearing when you go out in those different elements. So currently, I am number 1,934 on the list of official run streakers. That means there are 1,933 people that have been running longer than I have. That also means that there are almost 4,000 that are a few miles and a few days behind me. My son-in-law, Blake, has been running every day, coming up on 2 years this coming summer. Pretty cool. Today's run marked day number 1,999. So guess what tomorrow? I get to celebrate another comma. Not coma, but comma. Right? When you write a number and it has a little comma, you get it. You get it. Well, to register, like I said, it's just a minimum of 1 mile running every day for a year. And it is a little crazy when we think about it. And as I mentioned, for me, this journey started in 2018, going into 2019. And then something happened we're just going to refer to as 2020. That means many of us still have PTSD over the events of 2020. But I will tell you, running saved my stripples during 2020. It wasn't just the physical, it was the mental benefits that came with that regularity of getting the heart rate, the lungs going, the body moving when life around us had shut down. If we allow our environment to determine our condition, we will often see ourselves as the victim. When we confront, as sometimes we must, our environmental conditions, we can then be more self-determining. And the same is true in the spiritual life as in health. So now you know everything there is to know, because it's pretty simple. 2 things. Run every day, minimum of a mile. I love the saying, you think I'm crazy because I run. Believe me, you would see crazy if I did not run. 5.5 years. Wake up, glass of water, time with Jesus, and then a run. There have been plenty of days that I wanted to skip. Plenty. There have been many days in which the weather was far from ideal. In Washington, there near the coast, it doesn't fluctuate quite as much, even though there's plenty of moisture in the air. In the Midwest, we well know that it can get really cold. The coldest I have run is -20. And I had on lots of layers. I looked like the Michelin Man going down the road. I'm okay with that. Early morning commitments that require the sacrifice of a little sleep. There have been times when I haven't felt well, or I was sore, or had a lack of energy, and yet by God's grace, I have not yet been sick enough that I couldn't get my daily run in. It's overwhelming to think for a moment that on the odometer, since I began this daily running streak, I've run over 10,000 miles. You don't do that in a single day. It's one day at a time. You know the song, right? One day at a time. Running every day has taught me the power of routine and life-giving habits as I finish up. We all have more than enough time to get everything we want to get done, don't we? Did I say more than enough time? I think all of us need to start a to-don't list. Things that we need to quit in order to do the things that we really need to do. But I believe it's a matter of stewardship, a matter of caring for our whole being, body, mind, spirit. Each of us do certain things that help us cope with the anxieties and stresses of life. Running happens to be one of those for me. Running provides a positive outlet and builds resiliency for life and for ministry. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Running every day has been an investment of time, an investment in running shoes, but an investment in longevity and quality of life. I thought that was interesting that John Scharfenberg said, and I have no idea who John Scharfenberg is. His last name is kind of cool, Scharfenberg. Every day that you exercise, you're adding 3 hours to your life. Is that a worthy investment? Now, again, I'm sure there are a lot of health data that he put together to come up with this hypothesis, if you will. We'll call it just that. But if I run every day, each year I'm adding 45 days of life. And I happen to think, at least in my experience, I'm adding quality as well as quantity. I was talking with my friend Joe just this last Wednesday, and I asked him, as a daily walker, I said, Joe, how has walking been a blessing to your life? Oh, he says, I love that question. He says, it has blessed my health. Right on, Joe. It has served as spiritual enrichment, he said. He often puts in his earbuds and listens to the New Testament or the Old Testament or Spirit of Prophecy or sermons or whatever it may be while he's walking his neighborhood. It has also served as opportunity for mentoring and for friendships, as Joe can be seen walking around Andrews University often with a fellow student or two at his side. And then he said, well, and after all, Enoch walked with God. I appreciated his pastoral humor. For many, it's walking. For others like me, it's running. Still for others, it might be cycling or pickleball or hiking or swimming. I know that for the triathletes in the group, I would join you if I didn't see swimming as purely a survival skill. But that's just my experience. Again, to review the spiritual applications, running every day is part of my walk with God, my daily devotional. Some days are easier than others, implying that some days are hard. But there's something about when you do something every single day, there is always tomorrow. So guess what? If today didn't go all that well, it's okay. Tomorrow will be better. To me, it's an extension of God's presence. There's something about being out there in the solitude of my thoughts and prayers, but in the companionship of God himself. In my grandma's favorite song, and he walks with me, and he talks with me, and he tells me that I am his own. That's the kind of time that I wouldn't give up. Some days, the birds are singing, the sun is rising, the air is so fresh, and there's other days where the garbage truck is clanking, and it's raining, and it's windy, and it's cold. We'll talk on Wednesday that you can run for a long ways on fear, but you can run a whole lot further with faith. My attitude often determines my pace. Just my attitude, not my legs alone. What running is teaching me is perseverance, resiliency, and faith. I want to join Paul in this text here. He says, kind of summing up to young Timothy, kind of passing the mantle a little bit. This is the sentiments of one who is reaching the finish line. So not all of us can relate, certainly. I've got many miles, I hope, by God's grace, before my ultimate finish line on this earth. But notice the sincerity of these words. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. Those two being the same thing. The good fight, the race. I have remained faithful. No greater words can be spoken when reflecting on one's life. I have remained faithful. And now, the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, on the day of his return. The prize is not just for me, not just for me, but for all who eagerly look forward to his appearing. That last phrase, for all those who eagerly wait for his return, that kind of sounds like Adventists. Those waiting for his advent, for his return. So let's continue to fight the good fight. Let's finish this race. Let's remain faithful to Jesus, for he has a prize awaiting us, a crown of righteousness paid for by his own blood to give to all who eagerly look forward to his soon appearing. Even so, come, Lord Jesus. Let's pray. Wonderful God, in this race of faith we find ourselves in, each of us is called to our own race, the course that you have set before each of us individually. And perhaps it's smooth sailing and the wind is behind us. Maybe for others it feels uphill, the road full of potholes. But Lord, you have always promised to be with us in this journey of faith. But sometimes we grow weary. Sometimes we lose our gaze on the real prize. We take our focus off of Jesus, the author and finisher, looking to our own strength, as we'll reflect upon later this week. But God, thank you for going before us, for preparing the race route you have in mind for us. And yes, there is a finish line. It's not going to go on and on and on forever. We will one day receive the prize, and all too quickly we will cast that crown at your feet and say, worthy, worthy is the Lamb that was slain. Lord, in our journey of faith, run or walk with us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.